Jesus follower, in fact, you don't even have to be someone who believes in Jesus to have experienced these things in your life. And for some of you, I don't know why you're watching us today. You might, and you're not a Christian, but you are listening or you're watching us, and I'm telling you that whether or not you have faith in Jesus, you'll understand what it's like to go through those times that are so frustrating and you can't understand that in hindsight. Well, as Jesus followers, one of the things that we have as an advantage is just the collective wisdom of so many people who've come before us, so many followers of Jesus who've experienced the same things that we experienced, and they have wisdom for us, so that we can kind of take a look at how they thought, how they ran through these issues, and the perspectives that they had, and maybe we can take those bits of wisdom and infuse them into our lives and see if we can make something different. You know, one of the leaders of the early church tells us that when we look at what seems to be the unresolvable circumstances that life can throw at us, those things that just seem to always pop up, that no matter how good things seem to be going, they still seem to just out of nowhere surprise us. What he tells us is that in those circumstances, there's something specific that we have to believe. Something that's difficult to believe, but that we have to believe, because if we believe this, it has the potential to change not just our outlook, but how we maneuver through the tough times in our lives. Now, the person who wrote this was a man named James, and James was the brother of Jesus. And James is interesting because all through Jesus' life, you hear very little about James. James wasn't one of the 12 disciples. James wasn't following Jesus around. It was only until after Jesus' resurrection that James actually stepped in, and he ended up being, I guess, what would be the equivalent of the senior pastor of the home church in Jerusalem. And so James tells us, and he addresses this, and this is what he writes. He says, this letter is from James, a slave of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ. And something must have happened in James's life and in James's experience that made him believe that Jesus, his brother, was the Lord, the anointed one, the Messiah. He said, James, a slave of God and of the Lord Jesus Christ. He goes on and he says, dear brothers and sisters, so he's talking to everybody. He says, when troubles of any kind come your way, when trouble, not if, because James lived long enough to know, and he understands, like you and I understand, that troubles aren't an if. Troubles are a when. Troubles will come. And when they come your way, when we fall into them, when we're walking around and stumble into them, when they bump into us, James says, consider it an opportunity for great joy. Does that make sense to you? Does it make sense to you that when he says, when these troubles come, because they're going to come, that we should consider it an opportunity for great joy? I mean, it sounds like he's saying, listen, you should be happy when life sucks. You should be happy when life sucks. But that's not what he's saying. Let's go on. This is the next part. This is what he writes. He says, for you know that when your faith is tested, your endurance has a chance to grow. In other words, what he's saying is when those things come at us in life that surprise us, when those things come at us that are things that we just don't deserve, when the unavoidable circumstances and situations in our life come, that those aren't aberrations, that those aren't unusual. No matter how much we may think in the middle of them, that no one else has experienced the things that you and I have experienced, or are experiencing, other people have. And he's saying, listen, all of those things that are happening, they're to be expected. But he's saying that for Jesus' followers, for people who put their faith and trust in Jesus, all of these situations, these things that we call trials, they can serve a beneficial purpose if we allow them to. See, James is saying, okay, I get it. You're in. I get that. Now, don't panic. Take a deep breath. And even though you're in the middle of it, He's glad. Glad. Why? Why would he be glad? And James is saying, listen, he's glad because there is something good that is on the other side of whatever it is you're going through right now. You see, one of the things that God values is what we're going to call, and what we've been talking about, as persevering faith. The faith that goes through and continues on despite what the circumstances look like around us. In fact, this is the kind of faith that honors God the most. See, Jesus, throughout his life and throughout his ministry here, he would point this out over and over again. He would look at people, and especially his friends, his disciples, the people that were closest to him, and he would say, why did you doubt me? He would say, oh, you of little faith. In fact, in some translations, that when he says, oh, you little faith, he's actually calling them names. He said, you little faither. Why can't you be a big faither? You're a little faither. See, the kind of faith that gets a yes from God is nothing compared to the kind of faith that gets no answer or a no for an answer, but endures. It's easy for us to have faith in God when we need something, we ask for something, and it happens. But the real test of our faith is when we ask for something, when we beg and we plead for something, and it feels like we're not getting any answer at all. It feels like the answer to our request is a no. And James is telling us that the faith that keeps on even when there's no answer or it feels like it's a no answer is the kind of faith that God respects from us. Because it's only through those no answers and no as an answer times that our faith develops. So he says all of this, and then he commands us to do something. He tells us now, given all of those faiths, this is your part. This is what you are supposed to do. He says, so, let it grow. What is it? It's faith. He's saying, listen, you're going to have to give it a little bit of time. You can't stick your faith in the ground and water it and expect that tomorrow you're going to have watermelon. And I'm only saying that because, man, on a hot summer day like this, some ice cold watermelon be really, really good. That's all I've been thinking about since we started. James is saying, listen, so let it grow. Give it a chance. Don't run from it. Don't walk away from it so quick, because if you do, if you step away in the middle of the tough times, you're going to miss what God is doing in your life. Because the place that you're in, this place where it seems like it's just a completely untenable, unresolvable tension, is the primary place where God works in our lives. And it's the primary place that our faith grows. And James is saying, listen, let it grow. Give it time. Give it a chance. Let the tension work. He says, so let it grow. For when your endurance is fully developed, in other words, when you are able to meet expectations with integrity, when you are at a place where you are whole, he says, you will be perfect and complete, needing nothing. Jesus is telling us that we will get to this place where no matter what the circumstances are, no matter what we're facing, no matter where we're short, that we will need nothing. That we won't have a feeling that we can't make it. We won't have a feeling that we don't know what the next step is going to be. That we will come to a place that no matter what the circumstances are around us, what the situation is, no matter how hopeless it feels, James is saying that there will come a time where we will get to that place and we will still know that we need nothing. It says, let perseverance. You know what perseverance is? Perseverance is holding on when it's too hard to hold on. Perseverance is hanging in there when it's too tough to hang in there. Perseverance is not giving up when every part of your body is telling you to give up. He says, let perseverance God is trying to do in you. Because if you let perseverance complete the work in you, you will be complete. In the physical world, we get this. I mean, it's hard sometimes to grasp this when we're talking about faith. But when we talk about life and the things that we do, it's easy for us to understand this. Just down the road from where I live is a place along the coast of California. And there's this little tiny, well, it's not tiny, it's pretty big. But from this picture, it might look tiny to you, but it's called Mora Point. Mora Point is down in the city of Pacifica. And at Mora Point, you can see from this picture, it's like a little mountain on the edge of the coast. And to get there, you have to go up these stairs. Well, they're not really stairs, they're steps that have been cut into the side of the mountain. And then we're going to show you a picture of those steps and looking up to the bottom. Now, I took this picture this way, what do you call it? Portrait mode. I took the picture portrait mode. And so you don't really kind of get the entire thing. You have to widen it out. But if you saw this picture, you would see how many steps it is from the bottom of the beach to get to the top of Mora Point. It's long. And one of the things that I experienced after having gone up there several times is this. The first time I tried going up there, after about the first 30 steps, I was doing this number. I was so tired. 30 steps up. I couldn't see. But my kids were around. I didn't want to look like old dad dudes. So I sucked it up and I kept going, eventually got to the top. And I endured through it. And I get to the top, and then there's this view. And we got another picture. This is a view from the top. This is only on the city side. I didn't get a chance to give you a picture of what it looks like on the other side, on the coast side. But it is beautiful when you get up. Here's the thing. The first time after about 30 steps, I was out of breath, and I had to sprint through it. And when I got to the top, I was breathing so hard, I didn't know if I was going to make it. I didn't know if I was going to be able to get down. I thought maybe I was going to have to get airlifted off to the top of that mountain because it was just killing me. But by the second time, I got about halfway before I lost my breath and had to stop. A couple more times later, though, I was able to make it all the way to the top without stopping. And you know why? Because every time I tried, I knew that something was coming at the end that was going to be the reward. And instead of giving up when it got too hard, I told myself I have to get there, and I just kept going. We all have experienced this with one thing or another. I don't know what it might have been for you. It might have been climbing up to the top of something. For those of you who actually like hiking as a sport, or you go out, what are you doing today? Oh, I'm going to go see a movie. What are you doing today? I'm going to go hike. For those of you who are going to go for a hike, people, you look at this stairs at Mora Point and you say to yourself, that's nothing. But for me, it was huge. I mean, those stairs felt like they never ended. We all get this in our life. And it's the same thing in our faith. That it gets hard. But you know what? The more that we persevere through, the more that we hold on, the more that we hang on, the more that we refuse to give up, the easier it is to get through it until we get to this place where no matter what it looks like, we know what's happening, what's going to be happening on the other side of it. In fact, this is the second part of the scripture, the part of the scripture that we refer to as the New Testament, from the beginning of Jesus' birth and life all the way through to really where the early church just started to take off. One of the things that we see is this, is that spiritual maturity is not measured by perfect behavior, but by perseverance. Now, if you are not a Christian, you may have listened to that and think to yourself, that doesn't sound like what Christians really believe. And I have to tell you that I have been to many places. I've been part of the group of people who would tell people that the sign of spiritual maturity is perfect behavior. And yet when we look throughout the church over and over again, what we see is that the sign of spiritual maturity is not perfect behavior. And it is persevering faith. It's faith that continues on, that continues to believe no matter what the circumstances or the situation is around. You see, spiritual maturity is not measured by your knowledge of the Bible. It's measured by the unshakability of your faith. See, James, when he wrote this, he was, an older gentleman. He wasn't stupid. He's had a lot of life experience. And he doesn't think that you and I are stupid. He knows that what he's asking us to do is hard. So he says this. He says, if you need wisdom, ask our generous God, and he will give it to you. He will not rebuke you for asking. Ask for wisdom. Now, I know that when we are in the but in the meantime circumstances, the last thing that you and I want is wisdom. The last thing that we think that would help us is wisdom. In fact, when you and I are in those but in the meantime circumstances, you know what you and I want? We want relief. Right? We want rescue. We want God to shower down resources. We want someone to tell me what to do. We want someone to tell me how to survive. Instead, James says, listen, I know that that's what you want. But instead of all of those things, what's going to get you through it is for you to ask God, who is a generous God and will generously give you when you ask him for wisdom. Wisdom. Not intelligence, wisdom. Not more information, wisdom. You see, because what James knows is that wisdom at its core is the ability to see our current circumstances within a broader context. And if you're a parent, then you understand the power of this kind of wisdom. I mean, for those of you who are past high school, do you remember when you were in high school and you broke up with your girlfriend or your boyfriend? And you thought that, man, this is the end of the world. How am I ever going to live without her, without him? You don't want to do anything. You don't want to eat anything. You're ready to quit school and just totally give up. You remember those days where you felt like it was the end of the world? You felt like you'd never recover? See, when we're kids, we think the world is coming to an end because of what seems to be an unresolvable end of the world, forever going to be like this kind of crisis. We have a fight with our best friend. We have a breakup. Our parents won't let us wear something that we want to wear. They won't buy us something that we really need. And because when we're kids, when we get into those situations, we would do anything to relieve the tension. We see them and, when we get into those, when we got into those places, we see our children and they seem to be tempted to quit, to drop out, to walk out, to give in, to compromise. Sometimes they're tempted to do things that they know, that we know that they will regret. And we think, if we could just somehow communicate to them, that if you could see the situations that you are in right now, 20, 30, 40 years on the other side of it, you would take a deep breath. You would realize that this isn't the end, and you would move on, and you would keep going. Because we see it, unlike our children, we see it from a different perspective. And so when we look at the situation that they're in, that they think is going to be the end of the world, the crisis that's never going to ever end, we can look at them because we're 20, 30, 40 years on the other side of it, and we understand that there's a broader perspective to see. And like a good parent, our Heavenly Father sees our lives in faith. He sees our lives from a broader perspective. And James is saying this: if you will ask God for the ability to see as He sees, you will find the perspective you need to persevere. You'll find the perspective you need to keep going. So you just ask God, give you the wisdom to see as you see. And then he closes it out by saying this. he says, but. I asked him the wisdom, but. The but is, this is the word that we're turning on. It's instead of doing that. But when you ask him, be sure that your faith is in God alone. In other words, if you're going to take the trouble to ask God for wisdom, you better make sure that you are going to take the advice that he's giving you. You better make sure that you take the wisdom, because sometimes wisdom to the person who's in the middle of the situation doesn't look like the smart thing to do. It doesn't look like the right thing to do. It doesn't look like the thing that's going to make this feel better. And so James is reminding us, listen, when you ask God for wisdom, when you ask him to let you see your situation from a broader perspective, be sure that your faith is in God alone. He goes on and he says this, do not waver. For a person with divided loyalty is as unsettled as a wave of the sea that is blown and tossed by the wind. You see, the circumstances that we are in can cause us to doubt. They can cause us to question. They can cause us to start asking, is there a purpose? Is there any real hope? I mean, is it worth staying in? Is it worth hanging in there? Is it worth going on? We ask ourselves those questions. And James said, listen, if you do that, if you are one of those people, he says, such people should not expect to receive anything from the Lord. Of our life, and whether you have children or not, wisdom lets us see into the broader context of the life. Divided in the world. They are unstable in everything that they do. Here's the thing. If you take your eyes off of what God is up to, you will doubt. You will flinch. You will question. And you will start when there's nothing you can do. What are we supposed to do when there's nothing that we can do? James is saying, listen, when you get into that situation, when you get into that but in the meantime situation, he's saying, listen, hang in there. Hold on. Don't quit. Ask for wisdom. Hang in there. Because when you ask for wisdom, God will allow you to see from a wider perspective, a larger perspective. And you'll start to recognize and realize that what you're in is not going to be the end. What you're going through right now is not where you're going to end up. It's the place that you're going. And so when we get into those, but in the meantime circumstances, we have to remember that God is using for you what he isn't removing from you. Listen to what I'm saying. God is using for you, for your benefit, for you to have something better than what you've got right now. God is using for you what he isn't removing from you. You know, the Christians that you see in your life that make you go, wow, that's amazing faith. The Christians that you have in your life that you admire the most are the ones whose faith has been perfected through perseverance. The ones who recognize that all of us are going to deal with the unexpected, unresolvable tensions that always come into our lives. And wisdom is understanding that God is using for you what he isn't removing from you. I know it's easy to talk about, it's easy for me to stand here and say this, but it is hard to endure. It's hard to go through it. It's hard to live in the middle of it. It's hard to not think that God must be punishing us. But he's not. God doesn't inflict the pain on us. He can bring purpose to the pain that we are experiencing. you are watching us from, I want you to say this with me. And I want you to say this with me, and I hope that you'll keep saying this over and over again. But would you just, wherever you are, just repeat after me. This little prayer. Heavenly Father, I believe you will use this until you choose to remove it. Grant me the wisdom to see as you see, and the strength to do as you say. Amen. Let's pray. Father God, thank you for the reminder that no matter how hard we try, no matter how careful we are, every single one of us are going to run into those times when it feels like that there is no solution for the situation that we're in. When it feels like the circumstances around us are just so full of tension that we can't maneuver through. And Lord, I just want to pray today that for every person who is listening today, that when we get into those circumstances that will inevitably come, and for some of us, we might be in those circumstances right now. And Father God, I would pray that instead of doing what our initial reaction is, which is to run, to walk away, to give up, to lose hope, that you would remind us that we can ask you for wisdom. Because you are generous. You will generously give us wisdom. Wisdom, the ability to be able to see the circumstances that we are in from a broader perspective, so that our faith can continue to grow, that our faith will allow us to persevere, that our faith can be perfected as we go through the trials and the difficulties and the challenges of our life. Father, I pray that each person here would experience what it's like to have our faith grow as you give us the wisdom that we need to be able to see as you see, and the strength to do as you say. Thank you, Father God, for your love for us, for being with us today. Even though we're far apart from you, that you still allow us to do this. This is our prayer. Amen. Listen, I'm grateful for all of you who are spending time with us today. A couple of things before we go. Next week, we're closing out our But in the Meantime series. And one of the things that we do here at Grace Point is at the end of every series that we celebrate communion together. Now, some of you have your elements at home. You've been meeting with us on Friday night. You're ready to go. But listen, if you are in the Bay Area, because I am not driving out too far, if you're in the Bay Area, and you message us right now, either leave a comment on Facebook or a comment on YouTube and let us know. We'll connect with you and we'll make sure that if you let us know or connect with us by Monday, we will deliver to you the communion cup so that you don't have to worry about it. Wherever you are, not too far. For those of you who are watching from far away, you're on your own. But if you're in the Bay Area, if you call Grace Point Church your church home, let us know and we'll make sure to get those to you. The other thing I wanted to say is if you've been getting our newsletter and you know for the last few weeks I've really been hitting hard about joining one of our life groups. In a time where we have to be physically distant, we can still be spiritually together. And I know for some of you, you're thinking to yourself, man, another Zoom meeting. I get it. This isn't one that should be taxing. This isn't one that's going to drain you. Should be the hour or so a week that is going to fill you up and refresh you and renew you and help you to see that other people just like you and other people who are very different than you are going through much of the same things that you're going through. And we recognize here at Grace Point that life change doesn't happen in 1 hour a week. We're here together for our weekend experience. That life change happens when followers of Jesus live life together. So I want to encourage you to join the life group. You can go to wearegracepoint.com. groups, or just go to the website and there's a link there and you can sign up. We have 3 groups that are going, and this is going to be the last week that you can sign up. So get on there as soon as you can and sign up for our group. The other thing is this, is that right now, as many of you know, we are in shelter in place here in the Bay Area, which means meeting in person is not allowed. However, to do our broadcast every week, we do rely on many of you who are volunteers. Some of you who are in the area and you've not yet signed up to volunteer for the weekend, you just have a couple people here, a real bare bones team, but we could use some help, and we'd love to connect with you. So if you're interested in volunteering, we go to our online connection card. Again, the link is at the website, and let us know, and I'd love to have a conversation with you about that. All right, we are going to be back here next week at 4 o'clock as we close out our series, But in the Meantime. But in the meantime, it's like 90 degrees outside, so get out, enjoy the rest of the afternoon, and I don't know what you will do the rest of the afternoon because it's so hot, but enjoy the rest of the afternoon and evening. Tomorrow, I think it's been hotter than today. For those of you who are here in the Bay Area, have a wonderful weekend. God bless you, and we'll see you back here next week. Let the announcements run through.
See, Jake, it's not like. So the audio sounds like you're underwater.
I'm pretty sure 90% fixed because we were streaming through a computer, and the computer's only outputting like 15 frames per second.
13 currently.